The daughters of the alien queen disappeared, then were found sleeping curled up in the humans' room. It was not the peaceful kind of silence that came after agreements were signed or conflicts were settled. This silence was heavy. It pressed against metal walls and crept through corridors filled with beings who no longer spoke above whispers. The daughters of the alien queen were missing. They were not just royal children, they were symbols. Each daughter carried genetic lines that ensured the survival of the Virelian Hive Empire, an ancient species whose civilization depended on a delicate balance of biology, leadership, and psychic unity. Their disappearance was unthinkable. The daughters had been housed in the most secure wing of the station, guarded by layered security systems, elite sentinels, and psychic watchers. No alarm had sounded, no force fields had been breached, no signs of violence were found. They were simply gone. High Matron Silith moved down the central hall, her long steps sharp and quick. Her exoskeletal robes clicked softly against the floor, echoing the tension she felt inside. "Report again," she demanded. The security officer beside her adjusted his neural display. All systems confirmed the same result. No intrusion, no escape craft, no biosignature loss event. The daughters were present during last cycle check, then absence. Silith's mandibles tightened. "Impossible." "Yes," the officer replied carefully. "That is the current conclusion." Around them, representatives from dozens of species stood frozen in disbelief. This station was a place of diplomacy, shared knowledge, and cautious peace. The disappearance of the Queen's daughters threatened all of that. If the Virelian Queen believed this was an act of aggression, war would follow, and no one wanted that. At the center of the station, the Queen herself had awakened. Queen Threxia did not roar, she did not lash out. That alone frightened the Council more than any show of rage could have. She stood tall in the command chamber, her presence filling the space like gravity. Her many eyes scanned the gathered officials, her psychic field held tightly under control. "My daughters were under your protection," she said calmly. Every being in the chamber felt the weight of her words. "They vanished without pain," continued the chief medical overseer, trying to sound reassuring. "Their life signs did not end, they simply relocated." "Relocated where?" the Queen asked. No one answered. Data streams were projected across the chamber. Heat maps, energy signatures, movement logs, each one ended in the same empty space. Then a technician hesitated. "There is one anomaly," he said slowly. The Queen turned her gaze toward him. "Speak." The technician swallowed. "There was a faint biosignature overlap detected near the outer residential wing. It is inconsistent, weak, but repeated." Silith leaned forward. "That area houses non-essential diplomatic staff." "And," the Queen asked. "And one human," the technician finished. The room reacted instantly. Humans were still new to the galactic stage. They were physically unimpressive by most standards. No psychic abilities, no natural weapons, no hive unity. But they had quickly earned a strange reputation. Unpredictable, adaptive, emotionally complex. "And you accuse a human of stealing my daughters?" the Queen asked quietly. "No accusation," Silith said quickly. "Only correlation." The Queen considered this. "Bring me the human," she said. The human's name was Ethan Walker. He was a cultural liaison, assigned to Kepri Prime to help smooth misunderstandings between species. He lived alone in a modest room at the edge of the station's residential ring. When armed security arrived outside his door, Ethan was halfway through a cold meal and reading a worn data pad. He looked up confused. Can I help you?" "Remain where you are," one of the guards said, though his tone lacked real threat. Ethan slowly set the pad down and raised his hands. "Okay, sure, what's going on?" They scanned him, no weapons, no hidden tech. His heart rate was elevated but not panicked. "You are to come with us," the guard said. "Am I in trouble?" Ethan asked. No one answered. As he was escorted through the station, Ethan noticed something was wrong. Corridors were cleared. Eyes followed him. Whispers passed between species that normally ignored humans entirely. When they entered the command chamber, the temperature seemed to drop. Queen Threxia stood waiting. Ethan froze. He had met the Queen before, but only in formal sessions. Seeing her now, focused entirely on him, made his chest tighten. He swallowed. "Your Majesty." "You are the human assigned to this station," the Queen said. "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied. "Cultural liaison, paperwork, apologies, that sort of thing." "You reside in the outer residential wing?" "Yes." "Alone?" "Yes." The Queen stepped closer. The psychic pressure in the room increased, but Ethan remained standing. nervous but steady. "My daughters are missing," the Queen said. Ethan's eyes widened. "What missing? I didn't hear anything about that." "They vanished," she continued, "and the last trace of their presence leads toward your living space." The room went silent. Ethan shook his head immediately. "I swear I don't know anything about that. I haven't even seen them. I couldn't." The Queen studied him carefully. She felt no deception. Fear, yes, confusion, concern, but not guilt. "Search his quarters," she ordered. Ethan stiffened. "You can, but I really don't know what you'll find." The door to Ethan's room slid open slowly. Lights adjusted to the dim interior. The space was small, personal, filled with human objects, fabric furniture, soft lighting, scattered books, and a faint scent of processed food. Scanners activated instantly, then stopped. The security team froze. Inside the room, curled together on the human's bed and floor, were the missing daughters. They were asleep, not restrained, not hidden, sleeping peacefully. Their bodies were folded in relaxed positions rarely seen outside their private birthing chambers. Their breathing was slow and steady. Their psychic signatures were calm, deeply calm. Health readings spiked into optimal ranges. One daughter shifted slightly, instinctively pulling a piece of fabric closer. Ethan stared, mouth open. "Oh," he whispered. They came back." Syleth turned sharply. "Back." Ethan rubbed his face. "I thought they were interns or something." "They've been hanging around the last few cycles. Quiet, didn't say much, just sat there sometimes." The Queen stepped into the room. She felt it immediately, the pressure, or rather the absence of it. The psychic noise that constantly surrounded her daughters was gone here. The mental strain they lived with every moment had faded into something soft and still. Her daughters slept like children for the first time in their lives. One stirred as guards shifted closer. Without waking, she reached out and gripped the edge of Ethan's sleeve. The Queen raised a hand. "No," she said. Everyone stopped. The Queen looked at the human. "What are you?" she asked quietly. Ethan swallowed. "Just human." Behind them, the station held its breath. And nothing would ever be the same again. The room remained still, filled only with the slow, steady breathing of the sleeping daughters. Queen Threxia stood at the doorway, her many eyes fixed on the scene before her. Her children, her precious heirs, were alive, unharmed, and resting in a way she had never witnessed before. They were not alert. They were not guarded. They were not braced for duty. They were simply asleep. The High Matron Syleth broke the silence first. "This space is unsecured," she said carefully. "We must remove them at once." "No," the Queen replied. The word was quiet, but it carried absolute authority. Syleth stiffened. "Your Majesty, protocol." "My daughters are not in danger," the Queen said. "For the first time since their hatching, they are at peace." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Ethan stood frozen near the wall, afraid to breathe too loudly. He kept his hands visible and his posture calm, though his heart was racing. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I swear I didn't take them, they just showed up." The Queen turned toward him. "Explain," she said. Ethan nodded quickly. "A few cycles ago, I noticed them outside my room. They didn't speak much, just stood there. I figured they were observing humans for research." "That is unlikely," Syleth said sharply. Ethan shrugged helplessly. "Well, I didn't want to be rude, so I offered tea. One of them tried it, didn't like it, but they stayed." The Queen listened without interruption. "They started coming back," Ethan continued. "Sometimes they'd sit on the floor, sometimes on the couch. They didn't ask for anything, they didn't touch anything, they just stayed." "And you allowed this?" Syleth asked. "I didn't see the harm," Ethan said. "They looked tired." That word echoed strangely in the room, tired. Virelian royalty were never described that way. The Queen stepped closer to her daughters. She knelt beside them, lowering herself to their level. Her psychic senses brushed against theirs gently. She felt no fear, no pressure, no stress, only quiet. One of the daughters shifted again. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. She saw the Queen and froze. "I am here," the Queen said immediately, softening her presence. "You are safe." The daughter relaxed slowly, then looked around the room. Her gaze settled on Ethan. "You stayed," she said quietly. Ethan blinked. "Yeah, I live here." The daughter's mandibles curved slightly in a gesture that, for her species, meant comfort. Another daughter woke, then another. Soon all of them were awake, sitting or lying where they had slept. None of them moved away from the human. "Why are you here?" the Queen asked, though she already sensed part of the answer. The eldest daughter spoke. "Because here the noise stops." The chamber behind them filled with quiet shock. "Noise," the Queen repeated. The thoughts, the daughter said, the expectations, the weight, everywhere else they never stop pressing. She touched her head gently. But near the human it becomes quiet. Syleth stepped forward. That is impossible. Humans possess no psychic field. The daughter looked at her calmly. Then explain the silence. No one could. The queen turned to Ethan again. Did you know you affected them this way? Ethan shook his head. No, I just thought they liked the space. It's small, calm, no politics. He hesitated. I play soft music sometimes, old human stuff. The daughters shifted closer. That sound helps, one of them said. Syleth looked disturbed. Your Majesty, this human may be unintentionally influencing royal heirs. This cannot continue unchecked. The queen considered that. Then she asked the daughters, do you wish to leave this place? The daughters exchanged looks. None answered immediately. Finally, the eldest spoke. Not yet. A wave of tension rippled through the advisors. You cannot remain here, Syleth insisted. This is not appropriate. Ethan cleared his throat nervously. If they need to go, they can. I don't want to cause trouble. The daughters looked at him sharply. You are not trouble, one said firmly. The queen raised a hand again, silencing the room. My daughters will not be forced, she said. Not today, she turned to Ethan. You are under no accusation, she said, but you will remain available. Ethan nodded quickly. Of course. The queen straightened and addressed the council. This matter is to remain classified, she said. No broadcasts, no speculation. No blame, she looked back at her daughters. They will stay here under observation. Syleth hesitated. Your Majesty. Under my observation, the queen corrected. That ended the argument. Later, when most of the guards had withdrawn, the room felt different. Still crowded but calmer, Ethan sat carefully on a chair, giving the daughters space. One of them sat on the floor near him, her posture relaxed. You are not afraid, she observed. I am, Ethan said honestly, just trying not to show it. She studied him. You do not hide your thoughts well, he smiled weakly. That's human for you. The queen watched this interaction closely. She began to understand something deeply unsettling. Her daughters were not weak, they were exhausted. And humanity, without trying, without knowing, had given them rest. The queen turned her gaze outward toward the stars beyond the station walls. If this truth spread, the galaxy would change. But for now, she allowed herself a single quiet thought. What kind of species creates peace simply by existing? Behind her, the daughters leaned closer to the human. And for the first time, the queen did not pull them away. What had once been a simple human living space now carried the weight of something important. Scientists, advisors, and royal observers filled the edges of the room, careful not to step too close to the queen's daughters. At the center of it all sat Ethan. He felt like a piece of furniture that had suddenly become interesting. Medical drones hovered softly, projecting calm blue lights. Psychic sensors glowed with warning colors, then slowly dimmed, confused by what they were reading. This is not possible, one scientist muttered. Queen Threxia remained silent, watching everything. The daughters sat close to Ethan, some on the floor, some on the couch. Their posture was relaxed, too relaxed. They leaned without fear, their focus drifting instead of staying sharp and alert as royal heirs were trained to do. Begin the scans, the queen ordered. The medical team complied. Life signs appeared in the air, heart rhythms, neural activity, stress indicators. One by one, the numbers appeared, and one by one, they stunned the observers. Stress markers are at minimal levels, a medic said slowly. That cannot be correct, another replied. Run it again. They did. The results did not change. They are healthier now than during their last ceremonial rest, the medic said. Syleth clicked her mandibles sharply. That is unacceptable. Royal daughters are maintained at peak condition at all times. And yet, the medic replied carefully, they appear improved. The queen turned her attention to the eldest daughter. Do you feel unwell? She asked. The daughter considered the question. No, mother. Do you feel controlled? The queen continued. No. Do you feel compelled to remain? The daughter glanced at Ethan. No, she said again, but I wish to. The words landed heavily. Syleth stepped forward. Your Majesty, this situation is dangerous. Emotional bonding with a foreign species. This is not bonding, the daughter said calmly. Syleth paused, surprised. Then what is it? The queen asked. The daughter searched for the right words. When we are near him, our thoughts do not overlap. We can hear ourselves. She touched her chest lightly. We are alone without being lonely. The queen felt something twist inside her. Violians were never alone. From birth, they were surrounded by shared thoughts, shared purpose, shared duty. Silence was not taught, it was feared. Ethan shifted in his chair. "If I'm doing something wrong, I can move." The daughters reacted instantly. "No," one said. Another shook her head. "Do not leave." Ethan raised both hands. "Okay, I'm not going anywhere." The queen watched carefully. No command had been spoken. No psychic force had been used, and yet her daughters had chosen. Later that cycle, the queen ordered a controlled test. Ethan was asked to step outside the room. The moment he crossed the doorway, the psychic sensors flared. Stress levels rose, heart rhythms quickened. One daughter pressed her hands to her head, wincing. "Stop," the queen said immediately. Ethan was brought back inside. The change was instant. Sensors stabilized. The daughters relaxed. The room fell silent again. Syleth stared at the data. "This defies all known principles." "Or reveals something we never studied," the queen replied. She turned to Ethan. "Have humans encountered this effect before?" Ethan frowned. "Not like this, but people say things." "What things?" "That being around us feels normal," Ethan said slowly. "That they can relax. That they don't have to pretend as much." The queen considered that. Humans were strange. They had no psychic network, yet they lived with constant emotional noise inside their own minds. Fear, hope, doubt, love, they learned to carry it alone. Perhaps that was why their presence created space. The queen made a decision. "The daughters will remain here for one rest cycle," she said, "under full observation." Syleth stiffened. "Your Majesty, this is not a request," the queen said. That night the station dimmed to rest mode. Ethan lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. He was not alone. Two daughters slept curled on the floor nearby. Another rested against the couch. One sat by the window, watching the stars. "You don't have to stay," Ethan said quietly. "We wish to," the eldest replied. He nodded. "Okay." Silence returned, not awkward, not tense, just quiet. Ethan eventually drifted into sleep. The queen watched from a remote feed. She saw her daughters breathe slowly, deeply. She saw them dream. Virelians were not known to dream, yet neural readings showed patterns matching imagination, not duty. The queen closed several eyes. Grief rose in her chest, not for what was happening, but for what had been missing all this time. The next day, rumors began to spread. Other species had noticed the change. The daughters walked differently now. Slower, lighter, they spoke less formally. They smiled. That alone unsettled the station. A delegation requested answers. The queen refused. Instead, she summoned her closest advisors. "Prepare a classified report," she said. "Human neurological influence, emotional stabilization." Syleth hesitated. "If others learn of this, they will," the queen said. "Eventually. And then." The queen looked toward the human quarters. "Then the galaxy will ask something of humanity they never intended to give." Ethan stood in the corridor later that day, speaking quietly with one of the daughters. "Do you miss the palace?" he asked. She considered the question carefully. "I miss being cared for," he frowned. "Aren't you cared for?" "Yes," she said, "but not gently." The words stayed with him. He had never thought of himself as strong. He had never thought of humans as special. Yet here he was, sitting at the center of something that felt far bigger than him. Behind them, Queen Threxia watched, not with anger, not with fear, but with growing understanding. Her daughters had not been stolen. They had found something they were never given. And humanity, without knowing, without trying, had become a refuge. The queen whispered a thought she had never allowed before. Perhaps power is not what we give our children, but what we allow them to rest from. And as the station drifted through space, the quiet held. For now, something invisible had shifted, like a quiet current moving through every hall. People did not know why, but they felt it. Conversations softened, movements slowed, even the light seemed less harsh. At the center of it all was a single human room. Queen Threxia stood inside it once more, alone this time. Her daughters were attending a short advisory session nearby, and Ethan had been asked to wait outside. The queen closed several of her eyes and expanded her senses. The silence was still here, not empty, not cold. But gentle. She had ruled for centuries. She had commanded fleets and shaped worlds. Yet this calm was something her empire had never learned to create. She understood now that this was not something humans did. It was something they were. The advisory chamber was tense. The daughters sat in a semicircle, facing the high matron Syleth and a group of senior officials. For the first time in their lives, the daughters were not standing. They were seated, relaxed. Syleth did not like this. "You are royal heirs," she said sharply. "Your presence among lesser species without protocol is improper." The eldest daughter tilted her head. Ethan is not lesser. Several advisors shifted uncomfortably. He is human, Silith replied, a species without psychic structure, without hive discipline. And yet, another daughter said calmly, we are healthier near him than anywhere else. Silith's mandibles clicked. Health is not the only measure of readiness. No, the eldest said, but it is the foundation of it. Silence fell. Silith turned to the queen. Your Majesty, this influence is changing them. Yes, the queen replied. It is. Silith hesitated. That change may weaken them. The queen's eyes hardened slightly. Or it may finally allow them to choose strength instead of surviving duty. The daughters exchanged looks. One of them spoke softly. Mother, may we speak freely? The queen nodded. You may. The daughter took a breath. We have always carried the empire, she said. Its thoughts, its fears, its future. From the moment we were aware, we were never alone. That is our way, Silith said. And it hurts, the daughter replied. The word echoed, hurts. We were never taught to rest, another daughter said. Only to endure. We were praised for silence, said a third, not peace. The queen felt each word like a blade and a balm at the same time. And near the human, she asked gently, the eldest daughter's posture softened. We can breathe. Ethan sat in the corridor outside, staring at his hands. He had never meant for any of this to happen. He was just doing his job, being polite, being human. Now entire empires were watching his door. You look worried, a voice said. He looked up to see Queen Threxia standing before him. He stood quickly. Your Majesty, I'm sorry if I've caused problems. She studied him for a long moment. Did you invite my daughters to stay? She asked. No, Ethan said immediately. They just didn't leave. Did you command them? No. Did you promise them anything? No, he said again. I just treated them like people. The queen let that sink in. That may be the most dangerous thing you could have done, she said quietly. Ethan blinked. I don't understand. You showed them what life feels like without expectation, the queen replied. Now they know the difference. Ethan looked down. They deserved that already. The queen felt something shift inside her. Humans did not bow easily. They did not dominate with power. They spoke truth without knowing its weight. That, she realized, was their strength. Later that cycle, the first outside delegation arrived. They were the Cathari, a species highly sensitive to psychic pressure. Their leader stood rigid as he addressed the queen. We have noticed a change, he said. Your daughters are calmer. The station feels quieter. The queen did not deny it. Our species suffers under constant mental strain, the Cathari continued. If this human influence is real, we request observation. Silith bristled. This is internal Virelian matter. The queen raised a hand. No, it is no longer only ours. She turned to Ethan, who stood at the edge of the chamber. Would you consent to observation? She asked. Ethan hesitated. If it helps and no one gets hurt. The queen nodded. Agreed. Thus began the studies. Over the next cycles, carefully controlled tests were performed. Other species spent short periods near Ethan. The results were consistent: lower stress, clearer thought, reduced mental fatigue. Humans did not overpower psychic fields, they absorbed the noise. They are anchors, one scientist said in awe. They stabilize by existing, another whispered. News spread quickly, too quickly. The queen ordered containment, but curiosity could not be stopped. Requests flooded in. Not for weapons, not for alliances, for humans. Ethan sat in his room one night surrounded by the daughters. This is getting big, he said quietly. Yes, the eldest replied. I don't want anyone to use this the wrong way, he added. The daughter looked at him seriously. That fear is why they will trust you. The queen watched through the open doorway. She saw something no ruler could ignore. Her daughters were not withdrawing from responsibility. They were growing into it on their own terms. That night, the queen made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. She addressed the council. My daughters will no longer be isolated by tradition alone, she declared. They will be allowed choice, rest, privacy. Silith stood in shock. Your Majesty, this defies thousands of cycles. Then perhaps it is time, the queen said, that we ask why. She turned her gaze outward. And humanity, she continued, will be protected. A murmur spread. They will not be claimed, she said, not as tools, not as assets. Any species that attempts to force this gift will answer to me. The daughters watched her with wide eyes. For the first time, their mother had chosen them over the Empire's fear. Later, Ethan sat alone, staring out at the stars. One of the daughters joined him. You changed our mother, she said. He shook his head. She did that herself. She smiled softly. That is a very human answer. The station drifted through space, carrying a truth no one had expected. Humanity was not loud, not powerful in the way empires measured. But where humans stood, others could finally lay down the weight they carried. And the galaxy had begun to notice. The quiet would not remain hidden for long. Queen Threxia was reviewing reports when her daughters entered the chamber together. Their movements were calm, their posture steady. They did not bow as deeply as tradition demanded. The queen noticed. "Speak," she said. The eldest daughter stepped forward. "Mother," she began, "we request protection." The queen's focus sharpened instantly. "From whom?" "From expectation," the daughter replied. The chamber fell silent. Silith stiffened. "You are protected by the empire itself." "Yes," the daughter said, "and that is the problem." The queen rose slowly. "Explain." The daughters exchanged glances, then spoke openly, something they had never done before. "We are watched at all times," one said. "We are never allowed to fail," said another. "We are never allowed to rest," the eldest finished. Silith interrupted. "That is duty." "And it is breaking us," the eldest replied. The queen felt the truth of it. "We request asylum," the daughter said. "Not from you, mother. From the system that surrounds us." The word echoed. Asylum, no royal heir had ever spoken it. "Where?" the queen asked quietly. The daughter hesitated, then she said it. "With the human." The council chamber erupted. "That is impossible." "Yes," they answered together. "Do you understand what you are asking?" "Yes." "Do you understand what this could cost?" The eldest daughter nodded. "Yes, and we still choose it." The queen closed her eyes. For the first time in centuries, she did not feel like a ruler. She felt like a mother standing at a doorway she could not close. Ethan learned of the request an hour later. He was sitting in his room when Queen Threxia arrived unannounced. Her presence filled the space, but her posture was different, not commanding, tired. "They have asked to stay with you," she said. Ethan stood immediately. "What? Your Majesty, I never asked for that." "I know," the queen replied. "That is why it matters." He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't want to take them away from you." "You are not," she said softly. "They are walking towards something." Ethan looked at the floor. "I'm just a guy with a small room and bad cooking." The queen's mandibles curved slightly. "You are a place where my daughters can breathe." That frightened him more than any accusation. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. The queen considered the question. "Then they will return to the palace," she said, "and they will endure." Ethan swallowed. "And if I say yes?" "Then the galaxy will change," the queen replied. He laughed weakly. "No pressure." The queen looked at him seriously. "You are allowed to refuse." Ethan was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Do they want this or do they need it?" The queen answered honestly. "Both." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Then they can stay," he said, "as long as they choose it. And as long as no one uses them, or humans like tools." The queen straightened. "You have my word," she said. The announcement was limited, classified, temporary, but secrets do not stay small. When it became known that the queen's daughters were under human protection, reactions spread like fire. Some species were shocked, some were afraid, some were hopeful, and some were angry. A faction within the Virelian Empire challenged the decision. "They are weakening the bloodline," they claimed. "They are surrendering authority. If that frightens you, then you do not understand strength." The opposition did not press further, not openly. Life inside Ethan's quarters changed, not dramatically, quietly. The daughters rearranged the space, creating corners for rest, study, and privacy. They asked permission before changing anything. Ethan noticed. "You don't have to ask," he said. "We want to," the eldest replied. They cooked together simple meals. The daughters learned human habits. Laughter became more common, so did questions. "Why do humans accept chaos inside themselves?" one asked. "Because we don't know how not to," Ethan replied. "And yet you survive." "Most days," he said with a smile. The daughters observed everything. They were not withdrawing from leadership. They were learning themselves. One cycle later, a crisis erupted elsewhere on the station. A Cathari diplomat collapsed from psychic overload. Medics struggled to stabilize him. On instinct, one of the daughters ran for Ethan. "Come," she said urgently. Ethan followed. When he arrived, the diplomat's condition improved almost immediately. The news spread faster than anyone wanted. Humans were not just calming royalty. They were saving lives. Requests surged. The queen responded firmly. "No forced proximity, no exploitation. Humans will choose." Some empires accepted this, others did not. Whispers of coercion and abduction began to circulate beyond the station. Ethan heard them. He felt fear for humans everywhere. The Queen saw this. "You regret your choice?" she asked him. "No," Ethan said. "I'm just worried." "That means you are still human," she replied. The daughters stood before the Queen later that night. "We wish to return," the eldest said. The Queen's heart tightened. "To the council," the daughter clarified. "To our roles." Silith looked shocked. "Already?" "Yes," the daughter said. "We are rested." The Queen studied them closely. They stood straighter now, not tense, grounded. "You may go," the Queen said. The daughters bowed, not in fear, but in respect. As they turned to leave, the eldest paused. "We will always return," she said, looking at Ethan. "When the noise grows too loud." Ethan nodded. "Doors always open." Later, Queen Threxia stood alone, gazing at the stars. Humanity had not demanded power, had not asked for worship, had not even known what they carried. And yet they had become something rare, a refuge. The Queen spoke softly to no one in particular. "Empires rise by force," she said, "but they endure by care." Behind her, the station drifted onward. The choice had been made. And the galaxy would never again see humans as small. What began as whispers inside Kepri Prime spread outward, carried by traders, diplomats, and travelers. Every version of the story changed a little, but the core remained the same. Humans made the noise stop. Across the galaxy, species who lived under constant mental strain began to ask questions. Some asked carefully, others desperately, and a few asked with hunger. The first incident happened far from the station. A human trade ship failed to report on schedule. When it was found, the crew was shaken but alive. A powerful psychic species had invited them to stay longer than agreed. Not by force, by pressure. The humans had felt it immediately. Something was wrong. They were being treated as resources, not people. When the Queen learned of this, her response was immediate. "No human will be compelled," Queen Threxia declared. "Not by influence, not by desperation, not by gratitude." She summoned representatives from every major power. "You will not cage quiet," she said. "You will not drain it dry." Some listened, some did not. Ethan stood beside the Queen as she addressed the council. He did not wear armor, he did not carry rank symbols. He wore simple human clothing that, more than anything, unsettled the room. "They are frightened," Silith said quietly to the Queen. "Not of humans, of losing what humans give them." "That is why rules matter now," the Queen replied. She turned to Ethan. "You understand this weight better than anyone. Speak." Ethan swallowed. He did not like speaking to crowds, he never had, but this mattered. "We're not medicine," he said simply. "We're not tools, we don't fix people, we just exist." Some scoffed. Ethan continued. "If you take that away, if you force us, then whatever this is will disappear." Silence followed. The Queen nodded. "Human participation will be voluntary, always," she paused, "and humanity will be defended." The word carried power. Across the stars, changes followed. Human embassies were redesigned, not as centers of power, but as places of rest. Soft lighting, open spaces, no constant monitoring. They were called quiet zones. Humans did not rule them, they hosted them. Species who entered found something strange. No commands, no psychic pressure, no demands, just humans going about their lives, laughing, arguing. Resting, and slowly visitors learned how to breathe. Scientists worked tirelessly to understand the phenomenon. They failed. "There is no field," one reported. "No signal," said another. "No emission at all." The Queen read the reports and closed them. "You cannot measure trust," she said. Not all reactions were peaceful. A militant empire attempted to seize a human colony, believing they could turn humanity into a strategic advantage. They never fired a weapon. The Queen's fleets arrived first. "This species is under my protection," she announced. "Withdraw." The attackers hesitated, then withdrew. Word spread quickly. Humanity was not alone. Ethan struggled with the attention. He watched messages flood in from Earth, from families, from governments. From people who had never believed they mattered to the galaxy. They were afraid. "They think we'll be used," Ethan said quietly to the eldest daughter. "They will try," she replied honestly. He sighed. "I never wanted this." She looked at him. "That is why you are trusted." The daughters had changed. They returned to the council chambers stronger, clearer. When they spoke, others listened, not because they were heirs, but because their words carried balance. One addressed the council during a heated debate. "You are all too loud," she said calmly. The room froze. "We have lived in that noise," she continued. "It destroys slowly. Humans showed us another way." She looked around the chamber. "You cannot take peace by force, it must be allowed." The debate ended. One cycle later, the Queen invited Ethan to walk with her in the station's observation ring. Stars stretched endlessly before them. "You have altered the path of history," she said. Ethan shook his head. "I just kept my door open." The Queen considered that. "Do you know what humans are called now?" she asked. Ethan frowned. "No, anchors," she said. "The ones who keep others from drifting apart." He laughed softly. "We don't feel very strong." "Anchors never do," the Queen replied. A final test came unexpectedly. A massive psychic surge rippled across a nearby system, an ancient species collapsing under its own shared consciousness. Billions were at risk. No fleet could help. No weapon could stop it. The Queen made a single request. "Will humanity come?" Earth debated for hours. Then answered, "Yes." Human volunteers arrived in waves, not soldiers, not rulers, teachers, engineers, families. They stood among the collapsing mines and simply lived. The surge slowed, then eased. For the first time in generations, that species slept. The galaxy watched in silence. Ethan stood among the volunteers, exhausted but steady. One of the daughters stood beside him. "You are afraid," she said. "Yes," he admitted, "but you stayed." "So did everyone else," he said. She smiled. "That is your strength." Back on Kepri Prime, Queen Threxia addressed the galaxy one final time. "Humanity will not lead us," she said. "They will not rule us." She paused. "But they have shown us something greater than power." She looked toward Ethan's small room, still unchanged. "They showed us how to rest without fear." The stars did not grow quieter, wars did not end, pain did not vanish. But now, when the noise became too much, there was a place to go, a species who did not conquer, who did not demand, who simply stayed. And the galaxy, heavy with its own thoughts, leaned carefully not to take, but to rest. Kepri Prime no longer felt like a station caught between empires. It felt like a place people came to breathe before returning to their lives. Ships still arrived. Politics still existed. Conflict still argued for attention, but something had changed beneath it all. The galaxy had learned what rest felt like. Ethan Walker was older now, not much older, just enough that his hair had begun to show gray and his steps were a little slower. He still lived in the same room. It was bigger now, expanded carefully over time, but it remained simple. Soft lights, human furniture, a place where people could sit without being watched. The door was still open. Sometimes visitors came. Sometimes they left quietly without saying anything at all. Ethan understood. Queen Threxia visited less often these days, not because of distance, but because she no longer needed to watch so closely. Her daughters had grown into leaders, calm, thoughtful, and strong in a way that could not be taught by tradition alone. They no longer carried the empire alone. They shared it. One of them stood beside the Queen now, overlooking a council chamber filled with representatives from many worlds. The room was loud. Debate rose and fell like waves. The daughter waited. Then she spoke. "You are afraid," she said calmly. The chamber quieted. "You fear losing control," she continued. "You fear change. We feared it too." She paused. "But fear does not mean danger. Sometimes it means growth." The council listened. They always did now. After the session, the Queen and her daughter walked together through the station. "You speak differently," the Queen said. "I think differently," her daughter replied. The Queen nodded. "And you are still my child." "Yes," the daughter said, "but I am also myself." That had once frightened the Queen. Now it made her proud. Ethan watched them from a distance. He smiled. One of the younger visitors sat beside him, a representative from a species that had once avoided all contact. "You do not look like what I expected," the visitor said. Ethan chuckled. "What did you expect?" "Something powerful," the visitor replied. Ethan shrugged. "I make bad coffee and forget where I put things." The visitor studied him. "Then why does the noise stop near you?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Maybe," he said, "because we don't pretend it isn't there." The visitor nodded slowly. Humanity had changed too. Not because they were crowned, not because they were worshipped, but because they were trusted. Humans learned how to say no. They learned how to protect each other. They built quiet zones on worlds that welcomed them and refused to enter worlds that tried to claim them. Some empires fell when they could no longer rule through pressure. Others grew stronger when they learned to listen. Humanity did not guide that change. They allowed it. On Earth, children learned new words: anchor, quiet bearer, listener. But the most important lesson stayed the same. You mattered without being useful. One evening, long after the station lights dimmed, Ethan sat alone by the window. Stars stretched endlessly before him. He thought about how small he had once felt, how ordinary. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," he said. The eldest daughter entered. "You are thinking loudly," she observed. He smiled. "Bad habit." She sat across from him. "The Queen wishes to thank you," she said. "For what?" "For changing us," the daughter replied. Ethan shook his head. "I didn't change anyone." The daughter smiled gently. "That is still the most human answer you could give." She stood to leave, then paused. "When the noise returns," she said, "we will come back." Ethan nodded. "You're always welcome." Later, Queen Threxia stood alone in the observation ring. She looked out at the stars, not as a ruler measuring territory, but as a being considering time. Her empire had survived, but more importantly, it had learned. She spoke softly, recording a message meant for history. "We once believed strength was endurance," she said. "That carrying the weight without breaking was the highest virtue." She paused. "We were wrong." The stars did not answer. They did not need to. "Strength," she continued, "is knowing when to rest. And courage is allowing others to rest beside you." She ended the recording. The galaxy did not become peaceful. There were still wars, still grief, still noise. But now, when the weight grew too heavy, there was somewhere to go, not a throne, not a weapon, a door. And behind it, humans living ordinary lives, talking, laughing, being quiet together. Ethan turned off the lights in his room and lay down. Tomorrow, someone would come. Tomorrow, someone would leave lighter than they arrived. He did not need statues. He did not need titles. He closed his eyes, surrounded by the same calm he had offered others. Far across the stars, countless beings did the same. And the galaxy, vast and heavy with thought, learned one final truth. Humanity did not conquer the universe. They did not save it. They simply stayed. And because of that, the universe finally learned how to sleep.